Welcome to Bed Crime Stories podcast. I'm your host, T. If you like all things true crime, if you like it delivered in a peaceful, tranquil manner, if you like it clear and concise without drama, then I highly recommend you subscribe. And if you like what you hear, please smash the like button. It's a free way you can help. And now, without further ado, let's dig in. Well, hello there. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you guys are. Hello, my friends. 'Tis I. I am slowly coming out of my COVID fog. I'm still sick, but I feel slightly better today. The last couple of days, I have not done a thing. In keeping with my new brief segment on makeup tips, I thought I'd tell you about Victoria Beckham's eye pencils. They are superb. They're not overly expensive. They're definitely more expensive than, say, e.l.f., but they glide on and they stay all day. So there you go. Keeping it short, keeping it sweet. Let's move on. I wanted to share a new theory. Well, I don't know if it's a new theory, but it's coming out of author Howard Blum's book about the Idaho murders. You may recall that 4 University of Idaho students, Kaylee Gonsalves, Maddie Mogan, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin, all ended up deceased on November 13th of 2022 after a real-life boogeyman entered their rental home just off the campus. 6 weeks after the crime, Bryan Kohberger, a 28-year-old graduate criminology student at Washington State University, was arrested at his parents' home in Pennsylvania. Howard Blum has said that despite a judicial gag order prohibiting the 2 King Road house survivors, the victims' family members, and key law enforcement authorities from speaking, he still managed to interview many individuals with direct knowledge of the crime. And based on all of this, here's what he believes happened that night. It was 3:30 on the cold, starlit November morning. It was quiet. Suddenly a white car appeared, and it was in no hurry. The police reports describe how this white car crept along the street past 1122 King Road, the crime scene house, before driving up an incline into a dead end and carefully executing a 3-point turn. You don't see the driver's face in the footage. Howard Blum says he believes that Kohberger was battling with himself and with his demons in those moments. 30 minutes later, surveillance video footage showed the white car driving back toward 1122, as if dragged by an invisible force. Blum says he suspects that Kohberger was trying to find the will, do what he knew must be done to silence the, quote, howling banshees in his head, end quote. Now, just before 4 a.m., the time of the murders, according to the police, Blum believes that the car once again drove past 1122 before stopping at the dead end, with the engine still idling. Bryan Kohberger, according to Blum, and I'm going to say allegedly, then made his way down the dirt incline, mindful of the coating of frost on the ground. Blum describes him as having gloves on his hand, and he imagines Kohberger gripping a leather sheath, holding a sharp object. The students in 1122, according to Blum, rarely locked the sliding glass door to their kitchen, and on November 13th of 2022, supposedly that door was open. The panel would have effortlessly glided open, and Kohberger could have easily and silently stepped inside. Once he was in the kitchen, according to Blum, it's his understanding that the perpetrator proceeded up a narrow staircase to the 3rd floor, where the first crime occurred. And it is this fact that suggests to Blum that this crime was not aimless, that there was intent. If Kohberger were driven only by a blind animalistic urge to do people in, he would have first burst into either the adjacent second-floor bedrooms where survivor Dylan Mortensen and victims Xana Kernodle and Ethan Chapin were. But he didn't. According to Blum, Kohberger had a plan, and he believes it was to target Maddie Mogen and her alone. Kohberger, according to Blum, most likely first crossed paths with Mogen at the Mad Greek restaurant on Main Street in Moscow. The restaurant is one that serves vegan dishes that we know that Kohberger preferred. It's also where Mogen worked as a waitress. Howard Blum asks, did they talk? Did he ask her out? The prosecution and the defense have agreed that there is no evidence of any interaction, either in person or on social media. Howard Blum says, but I believe that wouldn't have been necessary for Kohberger to become infatuated with 21-year-old Mogen's beautiful face, her blonde hair, and her sparkling personality. I also personally, and I'm interjecting here, I think that he would have selected Maddie Mogen because he was very much into being thin after being mocked for his weight in high school. And I think that Maddie Mogen's very slender frame would have appealed to him. Howard Blum goes on to say that obsessions came easily to him. He was, after all, a recovering heroin addict. After getting clean after a stint in rehab in 2013, he turned his body into a, quote, temple with a strict schedule of physical exercise and vegan eating, end quote. He also exhibited some compulsion when it came to his studies. Once he made up his mind to pursue forensic psychology, he was determined to get his doctorate and prove to teachers and classmates alike that he was the smartest person in the room. Blum believes that after their initial encounter at the Mad Greek, Kohberger continued to follow Mogen, and at some point, his obsession turned into murderous intent. Then, whenever 1122 King Road hosted a party, as they often did, he may have been watching. Back on the third floor on November 13th, the perpetrator opened Mogen's bedroom door, and he found two girls asleep in the bed. Kohberger would have had no way of knowing that Kaylee Gonsalves, who had a separate room on the third floor, would be sleeping in Mogen's room. The girls were very close, and Gonsalves had just returned home after an extended trip away. According to Blum, he believes that Kohberger first slashed swiftly and savagely at Mogen before turning to Gonsalves. According to Blum, despite her grave injuries, Gonsalves managed to lift her body up and out of bed, as if trying to escape, before wedging herself into the far corner of the small room. And there are signs that she fought back, but it was all over quickly, according to Blum. Kohberger would, according to Blum, have stopped the spree here, but more unfortunate encounters led to more unplanned victims. The chaos in Mogen's room likely awakened Xana Kernodle on the floor below. I'm going to interject here because I don't think she needed to be awakened. I believe she was up. She was likely enjoying her food delivery, and she was on Snapchat from what I recall. According to Blum, Ethan Chapin, Xana's boyfriend, likely then left their room to investigate when he encountered Kohberger making his way back to the kitchen to escape. Chapin was 6 feet 4 inches tall, powerful, an athlete, and yet the killer did not appear to hesitate. At 6 feet 185 pounds, Kohberger would have been a comparable match for Chapin. Yeah, well, not if Chapin had been holding a sharp-edged object like the perpetrator, right? I mean, this was never a fair fight. According to Howard Blum, a medical examiner revealed that a single arcing blow sliced through Chapin's neck, and it caught the jugular. He fell in the second floor stairwell doorway. So now we know that he did fall in the doorway. There was a lot of speculation about that, but I don't believe anyone's ever come out to state that. Kohberger now likely realized, according to Blum, that he also had to deal with Xana Kernodle, who may have watched this whole scene unfold. And this is when he said to her, at least according to Dylan Mortensen, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." And as we sadly know, Kernodle was found deceased inside her bedroom. Blum goes on to say that Mortensen and Bethany Funk, the only other two students in the house, stayed in their rooms and didn't confront the perpetrator. And he says he thinks that's why they survived. I would have to agree. Bethany Funk was on the first floor, and according to Blum, there's no evidence that she even woke up that night. But Dylan Mortensen, we know, told investigators that she woke up around 4 a.m., peeked outside her second-floor bedroom 3 times, and the last time she opened the door, she spied a figure clad in black clothing and a mask walking toward the kitchen door. Mortensen, according to Blum, was too traumatized and too afraid to do anything for hours, so she went back to sleep, stayed in her room until 11 a.m. the next morning before calling a friend who arrived to find the scene and called the police. And he believes the only reasonable explanation for why Mortensen is alive today is one that she and Kohberger were in parallel states of shock. Blum writes, both were locked so tight into their own private worlds, a young girl's terror, a killer's mania, that they couldn't think clearly. Well, that's the end of what I'm going to share with you from the book for today. We know that on August 29th, there's going to be a hearing to argue the defense's request to move the trial from Moscow, Idaho to elsewhere in the state. Kohberger's lawyers are arguing that an impartial jury cannot be found in a small town rocked by such a gruesome crime. And if that happens, the trial may not take place for another year. And so it goes on and on and on until the next time on Bed Crime Stories.